Hi. Ever since Joe Zion's initial Ghostbusters 2016 review came out, the other reviews have been trickling in, and they're mixed. Between what I expected as the worst case scenario and what I expected as the mediocre case scenario. So that said, I'm probably not going to see it in theaters. It's not about the all-female cast. It's not about the casting. Which actresses? It's mostly that it's a straight-up comedy. And a Feig-style one. I've never felt compelled to see a Paul Feig comedy in theaters. The last comedy that I've seen, aside from rom-coms and animation, is Grand Budapest Hotel. And before that, 1992's Home Alone 2. It's been a while. It usually takes something of the caliber of the original Blues Brothers to get me to go to a movie theater and pay to see a comedy. It's not my usual taste. Anchorman and Elf and many of the SNL-ish movies, they just don't have that much of effect. They just don't have that much of an effect on me. I'd rather just watch them on cable or something, or when they come across home video. So instead of anticipating a Ghostbusters 3 movie, I'm not too wild about what I've been hearing. I'm going to be talking about the two alternative stories that I had come up with over last year. The first one is a canon piece. Canon meaning that it's in continuity with the previous movies, and that it's drawing inspiration from the animated series by Babylon 5's J. Michael Straczynski, and the comic book series. The non-canon one is something that I came up with July 10th of 2015, exactly a year ago. And it was after hearing about the original cast, and I was thinking of how this could capture that Ghostbusters feel that I loved and that I felt drove the movie into the hearts of all us nerds and geeks. The fact that it was horror and sci-fi and pseudoscience with comedy taking the back seat of Ecto 1. So I'm going to post now. I'm going to show you the picture of Rasputin right here. This ghost of Rasputin is inspired by how assassination attempts on this evil monk never seemed to stick, that he had struck some deal with demons or devils, and I had learned in a history course that it was through his exposure to different types of poisons. So I'm playing off the mystical legend and the tradition of Vigor the Carpathian. And I'm imagining that 100 years after Rasputin's death, Rasputin comes back after paying his debt to the devil. Comes back in spirit form, and it's up to these 4 Ghostbusters. I had already heard about the cast. to vanquish, to capture Rasputin, keep him in their containment unit. So now I'm going to be talking about something that I'm much more enthusiastic about. The canon story. My canon story. My unofficial canon story. I was trying to work with what is already a given when it comes to cast and story. That there is no bringing back Harold Ramis. That in real Ghostbusters allusions, nods to J. Michael Straczynski's animated series, you can't bring back Lorenzo Music, the actor who played Peter Venkman before Dave Coulier. So working around those angles, I came up with an idea to open the whole thing with a montage of newspaper clippings and web browser windows at a mysterious person's office or house or room. It's vague where this montage is taking place, and that is part of the mystery that goes throughout the film. It follows the Ghostbusters from the end of Ghostbusters 2. You're watching how they develop, how their business develops. And as the team ages, Annie Potts as Janine becomes more of a field leader as well as still doing desk work. Venkman retires to Florida where he still pesters Peck, making prank calls long distance. And the other three guys are still very devoted to Ghostbusters work. They have stepped up to more of the business side and lab work and hosting a Who You Gonna Call podcast from the upper floors in the firehouse. While the newer generation, Aisha Tyler as Winston's daughter, Kristen Ritter as Kylie Griffin, and Cecily Strong as Special Agent Monica Ortiz, are the new generation of Ghostbusters, working with Janine as the new field team. Tyler's character, who I haven't come up with a name for, would be the only genetically speaking, she would be the only next generation Ghostbuster. I was thinking, who of the original four would be the most likely to have kids? Kylie Griffin is a gothy woman, very into mysticism, who appeared both in the Extreme Ghostbusters animated series and IDW's comic. Special Agent Ortiz, FBI Agent Ortiz, is also another character from the comic. Ortiz would be the federal liaison, if need be. After all the trouble with the city, they may be regulated by the feds now. So after following the montage of the newspapers, of the development of the company, of Peter Venkman's retirement, and you still don't know whose room, whose place of business you're looking at this from, you arrive upon the accident where Egon was working in the lab and died. And it's ruled an accident. Accidents happen, especially when you're using proton throwers and ectoplasmic slime. You're working with the dead. And it seemed like just a hazard of the trade. So the movie picks up the Monday after the funeral services. And for any of you who have unfortunately gone through the experience of a coworker passing away, you understand and recognize that somber tone when you're just trying to keep yourself together and get back to business as usual while still coping with the loss of a friend. I like to think that after Lewis had left the city and Janine developed some sort of relationship with Spengler, close one. And she is at her desk valiantly trying to work, valiantly trying to keep everything going despite her pain. The remaining guys at the company, at the firehouse, are trying to cope with the loss in their own ways, putting themselves aside from the rest, upstairs in the lab working. And compassionately and understandingly, Winston's daughter, Kylie, and Monica, they are doing most of the work. It's the younger generation taking up the responsibility. So we look across New York to a shock jock. And this is where the cameos start coming in. The shock jock is played by Arsenio Hall. And he's talking on the radio. He's a Howard Stern type-ish DJ. And his producer is played by Maurice LaMarche. They're doing their repartee, their conversation while on the air. And all of a sudden, LaMarche, who played Egon on Real Ghostbusters, Arsenio played the original Winston. LaMarche starts getting into his Egon voice. It isn't as a means of mocking, it isn't as a means of parodying, but like when Anna Torv did a Leonard Nimoy impression in Fringe, it is LaMarche's character being possessed by Egon. Arsenio's character sees that something is wrong, and as soon as the show is over, he rushes his friend to the firehouse. Over 22 years, over 32 years, the Ghostbusters have made enough of a reputation that when there's something strange in the neighborhood, you know who to call. You know who to go to. So he brings his friend there. When he comes by with his co-worker, his close friend, acting so strange, not quite recognizing him, and saying that he wanted to see Janine, Janine Melnitz didn't want to hear this. She's grieving her lover, her significant other, her spouse maybe. I'm not sure how far the relationship got. That she did not want to hear it. Tyler's character steps up, tells Janine to just sit by and keep the other seemingly crazy guy company. There's a man sitting hunched over in a chair, barking like a dog, thinking that he's possessed by some neighborhood canine. That's Welker, the real Ghostbusters voice of Slimer and Ray. And Tyler's character sympathetically takes the responsibility of interviewing the guy, seeing what's wrong. This is a way of putting the main focus on this new field team, on these new stars, this new generation. It's not forcing all the responsibility on them, but showing their respect for the generation that came before. So Winston's daughter gets a brief idea of what's going on with this LaMarche character. She's talking to Arsenio, learning about who the guy is normally, and she brings the two up to the lab. Ray and Winston they're not completely ready to buy this story. Winston thinks that he's just another crazy, just like the guy who thinks he's a dog. Another possession complex, if that's such a term. Ray is a little bit more open-minded, and he's willing to give it a shot, but both of them are skeptical. They've both lost a very close friend, and although they aren't in as fragile a state as Janine, they aren't emotionally up for what this guy is presenting. So they run their tests and they find out that LaMarche's character's claims are legit. Arsenio leaves after the day, tries getting back to work, and can only hope that the Ghostbusters are able to help his friend and are able to help Egon. Egon's obviously got unfinished business. So over the course of the story, Egon is helping the Ghostbusters to realize that his death was no accident. The team, the younger generation, the older generation, and LaMarche's Egon LaMarche's character possessed by Egon, they all work together to find Egon's killer. A Shandor occultist. Ivo Shandor was the guy who created the transdimensional skyscraper, that transdimensional portal high-rise that was the big center of the original movie. The big villain is a Shandor occultist, and it's out of his office that you're watching that montage lead up. And at the very end, Egon, before leaving LaMarche's character, safe with his friend, Egon is able to say his goodbye to his friends and especially Janine, giving some sense of closure. despite being taken before his time. Bankman still doesn't want to come up out of Florida. He's having too much fun pestering Peck. So that would leave things open for future movies. It doesn't have comedy directly written into the story. And having seen the trailer's amount, I'm thinking that it would have been for the best. Because that way you're having the comedians, you're having the straight man, the straight woman, all those roles play off of each other, and you're getting the comedy to develop out of their chemistry, what they have together. According to some of the reviews of the Feig movie, the chemistry was lacking, despite the fact that 3 of the stars worked together in SNL. So that's my idea for the Ghostbusters canon movie. I've heard about the legal action that Marvel had taken against the creator of X-Men Danger Room Protocols, a very popular animated fan film. So I was nervous about how to present my alternate story. The more that passionate Ghostbusters fans spoke up against this film, after seeing trailer after trailer and all these preview film clips come out, the more abrasive the cast and crew seemed to be towards the fans. And I thought that was strange, to say the least. All of these summer films, these summer blockbusters that are leaning on IPs to do well and get merchandise sold and get butts in the seats, they seem to be relying on passionate fans to help bolster the income that it provides for the film's production. So when the cast and crew of the 2016 Ghostbusters seemed to be waging a media war against the passionate fans, many of them didn't seem to be as sexist as they were just loyal to the original movie and the original franchise. I had just never seen that before. You don't see that with superhero films. You don't see that with movies based on cartoons. You didn't see that with the G.I. Joe films. I know that there's a animated series coming out. It's got the real ghost. I know that there's a Ghostbusters animated series coming out. And it's created by the guy who did the Clash of Clans commercials. I'm excited for that, and I'm hoping that it doesn't carry over many of these cons from the Feig movie. It's fine if it takes some inspiration, but if it's bending over backwards to make the male side of the show seem all the less competent and more sexist, just for the sake of pushing the strengths of the female characters, I think it's a horrible I just don't think that it would deserve to be an heir to the Ghostbusters franchise. So here's hoping to the best. I hope that creators of Ghostbusters hear my ideas. And if I don't get some of these turned into comics, or if I don't end up writing for a movie or a TV show, at least hopefully they can bounce some ideas off of my suggestions. Pull a Stan Lee, and whether he wants to accept that or not. So good luck, Ghostbusters. Good luck, Ivan Reitman. Good luck to your cast and crew. For better or for worse, I hope that your careers are able to sustain.